Hi, Nick from Good Alex here. Just going to tell you briefly some key points that might help you with your digital marketing and being compliant in the post-GDPR world. Boring phrases, but really important to you if you're into your digital marketing. If you are going to be moving your business forward in the modern environment, you've got to use the digital and online tools that are available to you. Unfortunately, there are things called regulations. So whether we like it or not, we've got to adhere to them. We've got to follow these processes. So first thing off, health warning. My lawyers say we've got to say this. We're not lawyers. We're not legal advisors. This is just helpful value give to you for free. So if you want to know more, you can follow up later. But moving on from that, there's a really important point that most of you have probably noticed, and that is that in the run-up to the 25th of May, lots of people were firing out lots of emails all about GDPR, opt-in, click this button, choose to be on our email list, etc., etc., which is great. The slightly amusing thing from our point of view is that most of those, including some from some really big companies, weren't actually compliant. Now, technically, just before the 25th, that was fine. But even so, does this mean that people aren't following their right procedures? Probably. Now, it's not a big deal for you as a small business owner to get it right. There are companies out there that can help you. We're one of them. There's a lot of advice and information that's going around. But one of the things that we have found already is that one of our existing clients that we're talking to in the medical space, they use a medical compliance company. Great, they do make sure they're doing everything legally and appropriately in their practice. But they got them to do their GDPR and data protection compliance work. Fine, no issue with that. But they asked us to take a look at it. So being helpful guys, we did. And what was interesting, even though these people were Premier League in their domain, in their niche, they'd miss some important points, and that kind of prompted me to just want to get this out there to you. It's a little bit of value, just so you can see that there's a little bit of a wider question and easier ways for you to do things. So what I wanted to do was just run through probably the biggest piece of mythology that's out there about GDPR. Most people will tell you and talk to you about the fact that you've got to have informed consent and informed opt-in. And that is correct if you're doing certain things. But did you know that there are actually 6 different legal uses for data processing? And I'm going to go through those with you briefly now. Not a big lecture, just a quick run through so that you're aware. Because opt-in and informed consent opt-in, which is the very important part of it, forms just one of the niches of information that are out there. Now, number 1, and I'm going to read these from the big book of words because this is really important to get it right for you. Number 1 is the one that everybody knows about. If you haven't seen me doing these presentations before, A, I can't spell, B, my writing is rubbish, so probably listen rather than watch. But yeah, informed consent to you processing or having access to somebody's personal data. Now this is the classic one for email lists, for people opting into marketing, and all the standard stuff that you would expect for initial engagement, early engagement in the process within digital or online presences. But the second, and this is the one that is probably most relevant to a lot of businesses, is that you can legally have access to and process people's data if it is, and I quote, necessary for the performance of a contract to which the data subject is party, in other words, the other person, or in order to take steps at the request of the data subject prior to them entering into a contract. In other words, if you are asked to give a quote that's going to require access to their information, then that is legitimate use. So a good example, the one they use here, is if somebody needed to give you their name and address so that you could fulfill an order. that's a legitimate process. You don't need opt-in for that because it's, you know, it's a separate legality. So we'll put that down as number 2. Necessary for contract. Now number 3 is a fairly obvious one, but again it's one that people do miss. So this is more for people in the legal or financial services sector, but where it's a necessary part of their compliance for a legal obligation. So where somebody's got to keep records of a customer for a certain period of time, regardless of what the customer may think they want to do. If you know somebody is doing something dubious, they can't just go to their accountant and say, I want to imply my right of to be forgotten and you're going to delete all my data. Oh no, you're not. You have a legal right, and therefore the data subject is superseded by your legal obligation. So now number 4 may sound like a bit of a repetition, but it isn't really. It's where it's necessary in order to protect the vital interests of the data subject or of another natural person. So that means PII, personal identifiable information. So this could be something in relation to medical information is the example that's used, and where it's going to need to support the treatment of an unconscious person. So accessing their data for their benefit is legitimate. What's the word they use? Yeah, data subject. Okay, so number 5, and there's going to be a summary so what to this all, is where the processing is necessary for the performance of a task carried out in the public interest. Now you could argue that this and number 3 are fairly similar. There's debate, but there are legal differences. So where an official has to exercise their authority over the controller, so if police or legality comes into it. A good example would be a census or other legal process. So we'll just put that down here. And finally, number 6. Now this one is wider and more open to interpretation, and as the law becomes more familiar there's going to be better guidance, I think. But I'll read precisely again what it says so there can be no confusion. Where processing is necessary for the purposes of the legitimate interests pursued by the controller, that's the company, or by a third party, except where such interests are overridden by the interests of the fundamental rights and freedoms of the data subject, which require protection of personal data, in particular where the data subject is a child. Now it kind of links on to a separate subject that you do need to be aware of, that for this legislation, anybody below the age of 16, you cannot access their data without parental or appropriate adult consent. Separate subject for a separate conversation, but do be aware of that. So don't make the assumption that just if you're marketing or selling to younger people that you can just do it willy-nilly. Under this law, if they're younger than 16, you can't touch it without parental consent. So I'll put a note down here because I think a lot of people are missing this one. But anyway, the final one was legitimate interest. Now, legitimate interest is open to a lot of interpretation, but typically if business as usual would be a legitimate interest unless the data subject says they don't want you to do it. I'm not going to try and give you an example because I'm not a lawyer, but just be aware. So, when people try and tell you that, oh, you haven't got a double opt-in consent and you can't touch people's data, quote this to them. This is straight out of the book. So, why am I going through all this for you? Well, hopefully this has been of some value, giving you a little bit of background, a little bit of interest, and also showing you that there's more to the GDPR than just what's in the popular domain and what people are talking about. Don't have to work with us. There are lots of other companies out there that are doing this, but find specialists who do know what they're talking about. How do we deploy this? Well, we provide a digital marketing service to our clients. We help them to get clients and customers through, but we do it in a framework that helps them to be legal and legitimate. There's a whole bunch more to this. Where's the document? Here's the document. And so you can buy the books, you can read about it yourself. But equally, if you want to know more from us, go to our channels, go to our Facebook, go to our Instagram, have a look on our YouTube. We're going to be posting more of these videos. Hopefully you're going to get some more help out of it. And if you want to connect with us, you can get a free audit of your business or your marketing down below. So just click on the links through and hopefully we'll hear from you. Anyway, hope you like that, guys. Hope it was of some use to you, and good luck, JFDI, and be safe under GDPR.